Cis is a slur. Not talking about cis, hey cis, SIS, that you'll use amongst your friends, to your actual sister, sometimes a gay friend, whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about cis, CIS, and this unnecessary word, this aggressive word, this illogical word, this word that projects double standards, well, I find it extremely offensive. When someone is describing me and when I'm describing myself, I only need to say woman. That's all I need to say. I'm an adult female human being. The name for that is woman. I don't need to be called cisgender, cis woman, cissexual. Cis is, it's Latin, it's on this side of, the same size of. The opposite being trans, which is, the other side of or across from, right? So transatlantic, etc. Excuse me. Apologies, allergies. So it's used, to explain, someone is identifying as the gender that they were assigned at birth. So it means a woman who identifies as a woman, when in fact just woman will do, okay? Just woman will do. And then we use trans to necessarily describe a person, so a trans man or a trans woman, to necessarily describe a person who is biologically one sex, but who is expressing themselves or believing themselves or trying to will themselves to be the opposite sex. A trans man is a biological female who has some dysmorphia perhaps and wants to live as a man, be treated as a man. This is regardless of their sexual preference. And a trans woman is a male, a biological male, a man who wants to express as, be seen as, be treated as, be identified as woman. And for me, the difficulty comes in, the wrongness of it comes in when they want to have women's rights and be treated as biological women, even though they may have a penis still attached to their body. In most cases they do. They want to be able to go into women's spaces. And when I first heard cis, I'm like, oh, shivers, what is this? In my however many decades of life, maybe 10 years ago when I first heard it, how did I miss this? Am I just an idiot? I didn't know this was how things were explained or identified. This gender normative thing of being a woman. But it's something that sort of came into existence in the 90s, maybe mid-90s, started becoming prevalent in news groups. It was used in academic journals to distinguish between woman and trans woman, for example. And it actually came into being in the Oxford Dictionary in 2015. And I think this might have been because Facebook made it a thing by giving people on Facebook an option to identify as cis or cisgender, etc. Okay, so comes into the zeitgeist, doesn't it? And then it gets solidified in some way. Now, language is always evolving, but I tell you what's not evolving. Human beings are not evolving as far as sexuality, as far as gender. I mean, I'm not going to talk about intersex. That is very complicated. It's a little bit of a slippery slope when you start talking about cis, AFAB, or, you know, assigned female at birth or assigned male at birth, AMAB. But the person who probably had the most influence on pop culture, if you will, or culture around trans issues, and the term cis, CIS, would be Julia Michelle Serrano. And you might think that is a woman, cis woman, some would insist on saying, and no, this is a transgender woman, so trans woman, who is an academic, and they know better, right? Because they have a PhD in biochemistry and molecular, biophysics, and they've studied genetics. They know better. It makes me think that there is an agenda here, so to speak. And that was back in 2007. Things sort of take this generation of about 7 years, don't they? I think I first heard the term, actually, I think it was from Annette Bening, you know, woke Hollywood celebrity, who has a daughter who I think identifies as non-binary, something like that. It was very confusing to me. It just didn't seem to make sense because it seems illogical, irrelevant, unnecessary. But now it is thrown at women, especially. And this is aggressive. I take umbrage at this. You don't have a right to label me. It's all part of this ultra woke pronoun bullshit nearly, isn't it? I want to be a unicorn or they or sparkle pants, and I'll wear a badge on the days when you need to call me a unicorn. Maybe I'll have my headband on, but if I feel like a non-horned unicorn, I'll wear my badge so you know, so you don't upset me. Well, these people and their sympathizers will use cis and they think it's okay, but it's not okay. We need to draw the line right back at ground zero, at the foundation of the bollocks, so to speak again. It's sinister. It devalues me. It undermines my experience as a woman, of my struggles. It assumes that there's no inner turmoil. It's hypocritical and it's anti-biology. It is against common sense. And plenty of people happily use cis to describe themselves because they think they are being sensitive. They want to be understanding. And where I'm at now is I'm in a very difficult position because I, in the past, would have identified myself as open-minded to a degree, having a lot of people in my life at one point who are trans, all sorts of different sexualities being expressed, all sorts of gender identity being expressed, and it is a hard thing to want to take a stand when you don't want to upset your friends. You know, a lot of us might have lost friends about our stances, our fears, our concern surrounding the last 2 years world major event, the pandemic, right? And constantly I think people are being forced to lose friendships over things because we're saying enough on some level. Because to be part of TERF, okay, trans exclusionary radical feminist groups and the groundswell advocacy movement for women's rights, for men's rights, for human rights, what it means is you're not allowed, because it's illogical and it's not right and it's undermining the movement itself, you're not allowed to say, oh, but really, no, I don't mind, if, you know, I'm pretty free and easy. If, you know, I don't mind saying her, if someone wants me to call her, it's my friend who has had hormone replacement therapy and dresses as a woman. You know, I'm happy to go along with that, but I see the damage this is causing, and in fact, it's imperative that we have stronger boundaries. And this is sad. This is sad because not everyone is aggressive and trying to push their way into every human space, every woman's space, most particularly. They're just trying to live a life where they feel comfortable. But it can be selfish and it can be aggressive, whether they realize it or not. And there are many people that know how aggressive they are, and it's their modus operandi, but that's another video again. Because where the acceptance of cisgender, cis sexuality leads is changes in law. It leads to more and more child abuse. It leads to acceptance of children being in dangerous situations, of women and men being put in dangerous situations. Women should have women-only spaces where they are safe from people who are the male gender. And it doesn't matter if they're in a dress or not. It doesn't matter if they've had facial feminization surgery or not. Because how I'm coming to grow into this understanding is I might be all right, and, you know, back in the day sort of things, decades ago, hanging around a lot of different clubs. I mean, I was accepted as a woman, straight, into clubs, predominantly there for LGB, right? And I've come to understand, though, that this is frightening to a lot of people. For example, you know, people that have been raped, they don't want to be in a bathroom with men. And that is fair enough. And it's got to be 100% that. I can see that now. Yeah, women's spaces cannot be invaded by the XY chromosome. Okay, they just can't be, and it's such a confusing issue, especially, you know, if you've lived in cities where, you know, and have been immersed in certain sort of subcultures and things, and or know people that are deeply ingrained in these subcultures, and, you know, not to say that I haven't been very harmed by these subcultures emotionally, mentally, but I have also seen such good and kindness and just people living their lives as well. But there are bigger issues here. There's the future of the human race and human rights at stake, and we can't let these seemingly infinitesimal, little, or just innocuous things slide by. I mean, I really consider this as a public service announcement to say, reject cis. You're a woman, you're a man. You might have complicated things going for you. It might be the congenital androgen insensitivity syndrome, CIS, where you develop differently to other male humans, okay? This doesn't make you a female if your gonads don't fully develop, etc. But people want to gaslight society into believing this, and women need to understand what we're in danger of losing here. We're in danger of losing our entire identity, our right to womanhood, women's spaces. What about resources that are meant to help women who need it going to trans women? There's a woman called on YouTube, TT Exolansic. Her name is Sierra. She has a history where she's very well educated in speech pathology, which you study a lot about the human brain and human psychology, and she has studied gender identity. I think that's what her degree was in. She has a well-rounded academic life, and she has detransitioned out of trans maleness. So she's someone that can explain a lot more about the rights movement, the biology, but also she can explain a lot better than I could ever attempt to about the ramifications legally, about letting things keeping slide. So I urge you, if you have any interest at all in women's rights, men's rights, human rights, the rights of children to not be emotionally manipulated, physically mutilated, to have their futures destroyed through hormone blockers, puberty blockers, etc. I suggest you look her up amongst other people. But she'll, looking at Exolansic will lead you to other people. Maybe you're already familiar with people like Matt Walsh, for example, or Benjamin Boyce, for example. People like me who want to stand up against being called cis, we get so much opposition, and I think people don't recognize sometimes the root of the use of cis, and that it is actually fucking meaningless and unnecessary. It's from well-meaning people sometimes, but it's from people who just are trying to muddy the waters because they want the right to be seen as women even though they're men. They want the legal right, and they want to demand everybody that comes in contact with them call them woman. Now this is where things get weird for me, because when I come across someone who is clearly wanting to present as a woman or maybe as a man, and if I sense that, or if it, I am always going to just show them this what would you say, this polite courtesy. Okay, I don't have a problem with that, except I'm supposed to, but I don't. If they want to be called Julia and they were born Mark, etc., I have no problem with that, personally. When you've got people saying my pronouns are this, that, they, and those people are telling you that you must be called cis and not just woman, can you see how revolting that is? How hypocritical that is? How it's violent. It's violent. You should be able to say, no, sorry, I'm just woman. They will argue with you. People will argue with you. They won't go, oh, okay, or oh, that's fine. Yeah, you're a woman. It's like if someone wants to say they're straight. So they're a biological male who would like to have relationships, sexual, romantic, with female, human beings. Apparently, you have to say you're super straight. You might even be racist or a bigot or other such slurs or descriptions. If you're a woman, for example, and you wouldn't date a trans man, right? But you're straight. You don't want to date a woman, even if they've had gender reassignment butchery. I'm running out of time, but you understand what I mean? I'll talk more on this later. I'm not the best person to talk about it, but I wanted to share my views. I hate the fact that it means that my views would upset friends. It hurts, but there's a big issue here.